Welcome back to yet another install. We're taking the factory handlebars on the FZ-09 and we will replace them with a set of ProTaper Evo bars, Carmichael bend. They are black, so they will match a little bit better with the rest of the bike. And they are a lower profile than the factory bar, so it's going to give me a little bit lower hand position on the bike. It should help combat some of the wind and make it a little more comfortable. This shouldn't take very long. We're going to go through it step by step. Here's a list of the tools that we're going to use. We'll need some Allen sockets and something to turn those sockets with. T-handle or ratchet will do fine. We may need also a couple of normal metric sockets as well. These bars are a tad bit wider than the stock ones, so I plan on cutting them down a little. I'm going to use a tubing cutter for that. I also want to utilize the factory bar ends on these new bars, so they will need to be drilled and tapped. I have a 9/16 drill bit and a M16 by 1.5 tap, which matches the threads on the factory bars. We will need to reinstall grips on the new bars, so you need some adhesive for that. This is a Moose Racing grip glue, and you always need to put Loctite on your bolts for your control so that nothing loosens up unintentionally, and that should do it. There may be a couple of other things that we'll add in along the way, but I think that covers the majority of it, so we'll go ahead on over to the bike and get things started. Okay, so if you have any accessories on your handlebars like I do here with this ram mount, we can start with removing that. This is pretty simple, no tools needed. This comes off here. Alright, so now what I want to do is remove the bar ends from the bars so that we can remove the mirrors. I can leave that attached actually. I also have a video, I'll post a link down in the description below on how to utilize the factory bar ends with an aftermarket mirror by adding a piece of PVC pipe to the ends. Now we can do the same thing here on the right side of the bike. This is an 8mm Allen socket. Okay, now I can remove the grip from the left-hand side of the bike. I'm going to reuse the stock grip. In order to get these off, you can use an air compressor, the blower nozzle on the air compressor, to actually put some air up underneath these grips. Once it breaks free, there we go. Grip is good, no tears, no cuts. We can reuse this. So here on the throttle side, all we need is a 4mm Allen socket. So we can pull this rubber boot back. Like so. I can remove the top cable and the bottom cable, and the entire tube can be pulled off. Alright, next we want to remove the two Phillips screws underneath the starter control here. Okay, we don't need to pull it completely apart because the wires will get broken. So we can reinstall the screws just to keep them in place. Now we can take these small wire retainers here. These are just basically removable zip ties. You can see they have some on both ends. Now my next step here on the throttle side is going to be to remove the front brake master cylinder with these two Allen bolts. It's going to be a 5mm. Okay, so now we need to remove these controls from the clutch side of the bike. It will again be a Phillips screw head. Reinstall the screws. Just a few turns will be enough. Now we can remove the clutch perch, and that will be an 8mm single bolt that holds that. And now with this loose, we can go ahead and remove the cable. To do that, you want to turn in the adjuster. All right, now we can line these slots up so we can remove the clutch cable. Pull on it straight and then slide it out. That removes that. There's a small plug on the back side of the clutch perch itself that connects to these controls right here. We unplug that so we can slide the rest of the clutch mechanism off of the bike. Set that here on the tank. Okay, so now we have all of the controls removed from the bars. The only thing left to do now, loosen up the clamps that hold the bar down. That will once again be a 6mm Allen socket. And with that, the handlebar can now be removed. Okay, so now that I have the old bars laid out on the table next to the new ones, you can see there's about an 1 5/8 inch difference. I'm going to cut off roughly about 5/8 of an inch so that they are still a little bit wider than the stock ones. That should give me plenty enough room to attach the controls and still give it a little bit wider stance. So I set the tubing cutter. It might be a little bit difficult to see, but between the 0.5 and the 0.75. All right, now we can go ahead and cut it. That's it. We'll do the same thing to the other side. There we go. All right, next step. We're gonna go ahead and drill and tap the bar ends. Okay, so I'll first put something on here to kind of protect it from the vise. Now I'm gonna come to this end and I'm gonna run the drill bit. It's a 9/16 inch drill bit. I'm gonna run that through. You have to keep in mind the bar end is only going to thread in that far, so we just want to go a little bit beyond that. I think that would be sufficient right there. We'll go ahead and swap it around and do the other side. Alright, so now I'm going to take the M16 by 1.5 tap to create the threads for our bar ends. I'm going to use a impact driver for that. Just take it really slow. Clean out the threads often and lubricate it. Looks like that's going to work just fine. Now we'll do the other side. Alright, so now the next step, as you can see from the factory bars, there are small holes that are drilled into it. One is located right here, and then there are two more here. I'm going to get some measurements from the end of the bar, and then also the rotational angle of it, and drill some holes into the ProTapers that match so that all the controls will stay secure. I'll measure it from the end of the bar, right there from the end to the center. I'll put a small wrap of tape in the general area where I need to drill that hole. That'll make it easier to mark and easier to see the mark, and also keeps the drill bit from walking on the metal a little bit. Okay, so I've made a line which lines up with the center. And it looks like right about the middle of that line is where I want to center my hole for the controls on that side. Alright, now we have that secured in our vise. Can go ahead and center punch it. Alright. Okay, now the last one. Alright, so first we're going to position the bar back onto the clamps. Put one clamp back here. Just want to get them started for now. Again, remember the locating marking on the top shows you the direction of the clamp. Alright, I have it pretty much centered left to right. I just don't know the exact angle that I'm going to set them until I'm out the controls. Alright, then we reposition our master cylinder. We're going to need to slide that in quite a bit in order for everything to fit. I'm not going to tighten this up yet. We'll get our switch on. Make sure that you line that up with the hole that we drilled. You can feel once it snaps into place. Now you can put the screws back in. These don't require Loctite because they're threaded into plastic. Alright, now we can reassemble the throttle tube and throttle cables. You want to be sure that whenever you slide your throttle tube on there, that it spins freely, that there's no friction or anything. It still has some grease on the inside. It's like a white lithium grease or a moly grease. This one still has plenty on the inside of the throttle tube, so I'm not going to add any to the bar. So you just basically have to set up the cable. You put the long one on the far side, which would be here. And we can insert it into here and rotate it around. And then the short one will go right back into here. And then lastly, we set up the housing, making sure that we put it back into the locating hole that we drilled. Fit this back in like so. And replace the screws or the bolts. I just want to check everything for operation. Everything is smooth. We can slide this rubber boot back on. Alright, so let's get some torque specs for the throttle tube, and we'll go ahead and torque these down now. It looks like 1.3 foot-pounds is the recommended torque on the throttle tube. Actually, I have it set at 1.5 because there's nothing in between 1 and 1.5 on this one. Alright, again, I want to check to make sure that you don't have any binding on the throttle. And I did put a little bit of blue Loctite on these bolts. I'm going to pull these out and put some on it. Now we can torque these down. And that's going to be at 7.2 foot-pounds of torque. Okay, now we're going to move back over to the clutch side of the bike. Okay, so here we have to get the clutch perch back onto the handlebar. It's an extremely tight fit, so I've taken my Dremel tool and I've actually removed the paint on the inside of the perch, as you can see it there. You can pry it a little bit with a screwdriver to open it up, but you have to be very careful because this is a cast aluminum and it can crack or break off completely. So I'll take this small screwdriver and I'm going to kind of wedge it in there pretty good so that it opens it up just slightly. Again, you don't want to go too far. Just want to get enough to open it. And then we'll work it on. Once we get past this portion here, it's going to get a little bit easier. Just want to do it without scratching things up too much. Now I'm going to let that just sit right here. The next thing we can now install is the control for this side. This, and we get our screws and screw that back together. Again, these do not require Loctite because they are screwed into plastic. We can reinstall the bolt on the back side of the clutch. I'll put a little bit of blue Loctite on it. So I'll get the torque specs on that in a minute. And we can reattach the electrical plug. Okay, so now we can go ahead and reinstall our grip. We have to put a little bit of glue on here to keep it from spinning on us. I like to take the glue and apply it, a pretty good little ring of it on the inside of the grip. So if you can see that, I put a small bead of it like all the way around on the inside of the grip. So that way when we slide it onto the handlebar, it's gonna force all that glue down into the grip. I like to let it just kind of fall in there for a minute. Alright, so we can slide that in here. And if we get some inside of the threads, that's not too big of an issue. We can just take the tap and kind of clean it out after it dries. And we'll just let it sit. Okay, now we'll get the clutch cable off. So also, another modification that we have to make, I don't think it applies to any model prior to 2017, but from the 17s on forward, this clutch cable here has a metal sleeve on it with a bend that doesn't fit properly with the position of the clutch on the new bars. So we will need to take it out, and we'll try to straighten it up. Removing the cable is pretty simple. We're just going to loosen up these two bolts, or actually just have to loosen one of them to free it from this keeper, and then we just remove the cable from the end of the clutch arm. We'll get a 12mm wrench. Okay, and that frees it up from here. Now we just have to take it off of the clutch arm. Okay, so I'll take this small piece of rope. I'm going to tape it up to the end of the clutch cable. I'm also going to cover up these metal parts with tape so it doesn't scratch up anything as it gets pulled through. Okay, just like that. Now really easy. I'm going to turn the bar all the way to the side. I'm going to just feed the cable out. I don't need to remove it completely, but just get it far enough out so that I can work with the cable. That should be enough. And the rope will allow me to pull it back. Okay, so once again, my goal here is going to be to straighten out this tubing. We're going to use electrical tape to tape this up so we don't scratch it. Alright, so I've taken the end of a adjustable wrench. It's got kind of a rounded opening on it. Slide that in to about here. I'm going to take the end of the old bars, slide it over here, and then I can put a little force on it. Okay. So it's a little bit out of frame, but basically I was able to pull them to straighten out the bend on this clutch jacket. Eyeball it here to see how it looks. I think that's going to work. So now I can take this tape off. Alright, so now we can pull this cable back using our rope. Tie it back through. Pull it back through here. Alright, now we can reattach it to the clutch perch itself. Now I can go back, reattach the clutch to the clutch arm. This tape off. Slide that back down. Make sure that's fully seated, and then tighten it back up with the 12mm wrench. Double check all your clutch adjustments afterward. Alright. You can now adjust our clutch cable. Get the right amount of free play. So now we can go ahead and start torquing things down. That would be about right. So in tightening up the top clamps, you want to first start with the front ones. These are all going to be 16 foot-pounds. I'm going to remove this so that I can put a little bit of blue Loctite on it. Alright, so now we just can install our wire ties. You want to turn the bars from side to side, make sure no cables or wires are being pulled or binded. And then lastly, we can install the bar ends. Snug this down. And that looks like it'll do it. That wraps things up for today. It looks like everything's good to go. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comments below. If you have any suggestions for another install, please hit me up in the comments as well. Thanks for watching.